are you trespassing on this property?
This is my house, and you are in trouble. I'm an attorney, and everything you're doing is being documented.
One officer's ego turned a routine night into a legal grenade. What he thought was control became a $5.6 million mistake. And the house he tried to take from her, it became the place where his career died.
The porch light flickered once, twice, then steadied, casting a pale cone over the cracked concrete walkway and the trimmed azalea bushes lining the front of the house. It was nearly 9:40 p.m., and the quiet suburban street of Brookhaven Court had surrendered to its usual stillness, the kind that felt peaceful until you noticed how unnaturally silent it truly was. Danielle Harper stepped out of her parked Lexus, adjusted the strap of her leather work bag onto her shoulder, and inhaled the cool evening air. The day had bled her dry. 12 hours in court defending a corporate whistleblower would exhaust even the most resilient attorneys. But this house, this was her sanctuary. She had bought it 3 years earlier. Every cent earned through sweat, grit, and a law degree that had carved her name into rooms that once refused to say it aloud. She reached into her purse for her keys. That was when she heard it. "Ma'am, step away from the property. Now." The voice was sharp, commanding, uninvited. Danielle turned slowly. A patrol car idled across the street, red and blue lights dormant but accusatory in their presence. Officer Bradley Henson stood beside it, hand resting casually on his belt, his posture rehearsed and territorial. His eyes swept over her, not with curiosity but assessment, as if she were an anomaly that didn't belong in this postal code. "I live here," she replied calmly, holding up her keys. "Danielle Harper, this is my residence." Officer Henson tilted his head slightly, the corner of his mouth tightening. "I've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. You match the description." A pause thickened the air. "And what description is that?" she asked, voice even but sharpened by instinct. "A female attempting to gain unauthorized access to private property." Danielle let out a measured breath, fighting the familiar surge of frustration. "Officer, I just came home from work. I am entering my house. You can run my plates. You can check your system. But I'm not attempting to access anything. I own this property." He stepped closer, boots scraping against pavement. "Until I verify that, you will not proceed." Her jaw tightened. "That's unreasonable. I can show you my ID and the property deed on my phone right now." He didn't reach for it. Instead, he crossed his arms. "Your cooperation will determine how this goes." The subtext was clear, and it wasn't professional. It was personal, calculated. Danielle glanced at the neighboring houses. Lights dim, curtains drawn. Nobody keen to witness what was unfolding. Nobody eager to get involved. "Are you seriously telling me I'm trespassing in my own home?" she asked. Officer Henson's gaze hardened. "Right now. You're a person of interest standing on property you can't yet prove is yours." The words hit like ice water. She took out her phone anyway, opening photos of mortgage documents, utility bills, identification. He didn't bother leaning in, didn't scan, didn't acknowledge the evidence she was presenting. "You can't just stand here and intimidate me," she said. "I'm an attorney. I know my rights." A flicker, the slightest twitch of irritation, crossed his face. "We'll see about that." He reached for his radio. Danielle's heartbeat accelerated, but her posture remained firm. She refused to shrink, refused to disappear into the mold his assumptions demanded she fit. "You are making a very serious mistake," she stated, voice low, deliberate. "And I promise you, this won't end the way you think it will." The officer smirked faintly. "We'll find out soon enough." The distant sound of another guard unit began to grow louder, and in that moment, standing under the trembling porch light of the home she had worked her entire life to own, Danielle Harper realized this was no misunderstanding. This was a confrontation that would detonate far beyond the street. Something bigger had just begun. The second patrol car rolled in with deliberate slowness, tires whispering against asphalt as it came to a halt behind Henson's cruiser. The synchronized flash of red and blue painted Danielle's face in fractured color, like she had suddenly stepped onto a stage she never auditioned for but could not leave. Officer Maria Cortez stepped out, younger, sharper eyes, observing before speaking. "What's the situation?" she asked. Henson didn't look at Danielle, when he answered, possible trespasser. Claims this is her residence, but can't verify yet. Danielle let out a controlled laugh, not amused, but incredulous. I have verified. Repeatedly. He just doesn't want to look. Cortez glanced at Danielle, then at the house, then back at Henson. Ma'am, can I see your ID? Danielle handed it over without hesitation. Cortez reviewed it, then pointed subtly toward the mailbox where the last name Harper was clearly printed in clean block font. She does live here, Cortez said quietly. The address on her license matches. Henson's jaw flexed. Still doesn't explain her behavior. My behavior? Danielle's voice sharpened. Walk into my front door? He stepped forward again, invading her space. You're becoming hostile. No, she corrected coldly. I'm becoming recorded. She raised her phone, camera already rolling. The red blinked defiance. Everything you say from this moment forward is going to live longer than your badge, she informed him. Henson's eyes narrowed. Put the phone down. I don't take legal advice from people violating the law, she replied. Cortez cleared her throat. Officer Henson, property ownership checks out. There's no need for escalation. But escalation was already in motion, and Henson didn't look like a man who backed down when his authority was questioned, especially by a woman who refused to bow to it. This encounter isn't over, he muttered before stepping back, irritation radiating from every line of his stance. Danielle exhaled slowly as Cortez returned her ID. Thank you, she said, but her eyes stayed on Henson. Sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am, Cortez added, though her tone suggested something deeper, recognition of imbalance. Henson climbed back into his vehicle without another word, but as the patrol cars pulled away, Danielle could feel it. The tension hadn't dissolved. It had merely retreated. Wounded, inside her home, the quiet that once felt safe now felt violated. She stood in the entryway for a long moment, phone still clutched in her hand, replaying the exchange in her mind. Every word, every expression, every calculated pause. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. She hesitated. Answered. Ms. Harper? A male voice asked. This is Jonathan Reed with Internal Affairs. We've received a complaint regarding Officer Bradley Henson and a potential misconduct incident tonight. We'd like to speak with you first thing tomorrow morning. Danielle's lips pressed then. So it begins, she murmured. This is a formal inquiry, Reed continued. We take these matters seriously. Yes, she replied coolly. You probably should. She ended the call and stared at the darkened window, her reflected silhouette standing tall and unbroken. This wasn't just about respect. This was about accountability. And she already knew something the department hadn't realized yet. They just picked a fight with the wrong woman. Danielle didn't sleep. Sleep was a luxury reserved for people who weren't processing the calculated humiliation they'd endured on their own driveway. Instead, she sat at her kitchen island with her laptop open, body cam footage replaying on a loop from her phone. Every detail mattered. Every inflection, every word Henson had used would be dissected, cataloged, and preserved. By 5:12 a.m., she had already drafted a timeline. Time of arrival, initial confrontation, refusal to review identification, hostile escalation, and a phrase that echoed louder than all the rest. Your cooperation will determine how this goes. She saved the file under one word, documentation. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, Danielle pulled into the Internal Affairs Division parking lot, her presence sharp, controlled, immovable. A tailored charcoal blazer replaced the exhaustion. Her face told no story but authority. Jonathan Reed met her in the lobby, mid-40s, polished, the kind of man who knew how to sound concerned without ever committing to change. Ms. Harper, thank you for coming in on such short notice. I didn't come for pleasantries, she said calmly. I came for clarity. Inside the interview room, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she placed her phone on the metal table. I want it known that I'm recording this, she stated. Reed nodded. You're within your rights. He asked his questions. She delivered facts. Not emotion, not speculation, only precision. When the footage played, Reed's jaw subtly stiffened at Henson's tone. "That's not standard protocol," he admitted. "No," Danielle replied, eyes sharp. "It's abuse wrapped in a uniform. What outcome are you seeking here, Miss Harper?" Her gaze didn't waver. Accountability. And a system that learns how to fear consequences. 2 days later, Officer Bradley Henson made his first mistake. He came back. A different call. Same car. Same street. This time, he didn't even pretend it was official. Danielle opened her door to see him standing on her porch. Off duty, no badge visible. Arrogance worn like perfume. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," he said. "You shouldn't be here," she replied instantly. "I just wanted to clear the air," he smirked. No hard feelings. Her phone was already recording. "Leave my property immediately," she instructed. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he muttered, leaning casually against the railing. "You could have just cooperated like a normal person." Silence. Then Danielle stepped forward slightly, enough for her voice to carry with lethal calm. "The last time you questioned whether I belonged here, it cost you professionally. This time, it's going to cost you everything." His smile faltered. "Careful," he said. "Threats won't look good in court." "This isn't a threat," she replied flatly. "It's a forecast." He left without another word, but not before letting his eyes linger far longer than necessary. Predatory. Provoked. Petty. Danielle closed the door, locked it, and immediately forwarded the recording to her legal firm and an external civil rights attorney she'd already contacted that morning. By nightfall, a formal harassment claim was filed. By the next morning, the footage from the driveway had surfaced anonymously on social media. No captions, no edits, just raw behavior. Views climbed past 800,000 before noon. By evening, 3.2 million. Hashtags bloomed like wildfire. Hashtag home is not suspicious. Hashtag bad does not mean bias. Hashtag justice for Harper. Bradley Henson didn't log into his department system that day. His commanding officer had already requested a mandatory suspension review. And Danielle Harper? She wasn't finished. She wasn't even warmed up. By the third morning, Danielle Harper was no longer just a homeowner who'd been harassed by a uniformed ego. She was national conversation. Her phone didn't stop vibrating. Voicemails stacked like legal exhibits. Morning show producers. Civil rights organizations. Digital journalists hunting for a statement that would fracture the internet even further. She gave them one. Not emotional. Not theatrical. Cold. Surgical. Impossible to twist. What happened to me was not confusion. It was assumption. It was authority weaponized against identity. And the fact that it happened on my own property should terrify anyone who thinks this system only targets certain people. It doesn't. It targets whoever doesn't look like power. That clip alone crossed 10 million views by sunset. The Brookhaven Police Department issued a statement within hours. Carefully worded, painfully generic. "We are conducting an internal review and do not tolerate misconduct by any of our officers." Danielle read it once and closed the tab. "Translation," she muttered. "We hope this goes away." It wouldn't. Not now. Not after Officer Henson decided panic was an appropriate strategy. At 9:17 p.m., as Danielle sat at her desk reviewing draft complaints with her civil rights attorney, her security system blinked, motion detected. Front yard. She pulled the live camera feed onto her screen. Bradley Henson's car, parked across the street, engine running. Lights off. He sat inside, unmoving, watching. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. Danielle picked up her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious vehicle parked outside my property. The driver is a former officer currently under investigation for harassment and intimidation." The irony was sharp enough to slice glass. Within minutes, 2 units arrived. Blue lights flooded the street. Officers approached the vehicle cautiously, exactly as protocol demanded. Henson stepped out, throwing his hands up in mock annoyance. "You're really pushing this narrative, huh?" he called toward her porch where she stood, phone in hand, documenting everything. "You're proving mine," she replied. By the next morning, the footage of an officer being questioned on the very street he once claimed authority over was circulating like wildfire. Even internal emails leaked. Subject line: immediate concern, Officer Henson liability risk. The department couldn't protect him anymore. They suspended him without pay pending investigation and placed a formal no-contact order regarding Danielle Harper. Too late. The damage to him had already fossilized. But what he failed to realize was this wasn't just about public embarrassment. Danielle and her legal team were constructing something far heavier, a civil lawsuit, not for attention, for precedent. Her lead attorney, Marcus DeLeon, was known for one thing: setting examples that echoed across courtrooms for decades. "We don't just win," he told her across the conference table. "We create line items cities remember when they train their officers." "What's the figure?" Danielle asked. He slid a folder toward her. $5.6 million. Wrongful intimidation, civil harassment, civil rights infringement, psychological distress, pattern of discriminatory conduct. "This will force reform or sink the department under scrutiny," he stated. Danielle closed the folder, then let it sink. Across town, Bradley Henson sat at his apartment surrounded by unopened mail, unpaid bills, and a TV that wouldn't stop replaying his own downfall. His name had become a headline. His badge? Already stripped. And just when he thought the narrative couldn't get worse, the department released full body cam files. Unedited. Every word, every expression, every arrogance-soaked syllable. The country watched in silence, and the silence was louder than outrage. Outside, reporters clustered behind barricades, microphones stacked like weapons, cameras hunting for emotion. Protesters filled the sidewalks, not screaming, not chaotic, but firm, calculated. Signs held high, eyes focused, silence loud. Danielle Harper stepped out of the black, sedan with precision, every inch her calm weaponized. No dramatic gestures, no trembling, just presence. Inside courtroom 4B, the air carried the sterile scent of polished wood and consequence. Judge Eleanor Whitaker presided, a reputation for fairness sharpened by decades of refusing political theater. On the right, Danielle and her legal team. On the left, the city's defense counsel and a man who no longer wore a uniform. Bradley Henson avoided eye contact. He looked smaller now, hollow, stripped of the authority that once inflated his spine. Marcus DeLeon stood first. "Your Honor," he began, voice steady as granite. "This case is not about misunderstanding. It is about weaponized discretion. It is about an officer who confused power with ownership, and a system that allowed him to behave as though constitutional rights were optional." He didn't gesture dramatically. He didn't perform. He presented facts. Body cam footage, call logs, time-stamped interactions, the unauthorized porch confrontation, the deliberate pattern. Every screen in the courtroom displayed Bradley Henson ignoring Danielle's identification, cutting her off, questioning her right to exist on her own property. Then came the witness testimony. Neighbor after neighbor. One described seeing Henson circle the block 3 times before confronting her like she was committing a crime just by parking. Another testified about hearing his voice raise, sharp, condescending, needlessly aggressive. And then Danielle took the stand. Her oath was quiet. Her words lethal in their calm. "I did not ask to become a symbol," she said plainly. "I asked to enter my home." Her gaze flicked briefly toward Henson. "And instead, I was treated like an intruder in a life I built from nothing but discipline." The courtroom didn't breathe. Then the shock arrived. A subpoenaed internal memo surfaced. Emails exchanged weeks before the incident. A pattern report. Bradley Henson had already been flagged twice for excessive discretion during civilian engagements and language that may suggest implicit bias. The city had done nothing. Judge Whitaker's expression hardened. The defense tried to pivot. Stress, poor judgment, a momentary lapse. Marcus DeLeon didn't blink. "A lapse is forgetting your keys," he said coolly. This was a pattern, wearing a badge. Hours stretched, evidence stacked, arguments dissected, and then the moment arrived. The verdict. The judge leaned forward, fingers interlaced. This court finds Officer Bradley Henson's actions to be not only improper, but unconstitutional. The conduct exhibited demonstrates clear violation of civil rights, procedural abuse, and deliberate intimidation. She paused, a silence heavy enough to fracture glass. The city of Brookhaven is hereby ordered to pay damages totaling $5.6 million to Danielle Harper. No gasps, no applause, just a collective release of breath. A ruling etched into precedent. Henson's expression barely changed, but his shoulders sagged as though the final illusion of power had been surgically removed. Outside, headlines detonated. Lawyer wins $5.60 million after officer claims she trespassed on own home. Badge-based bias cost city millions. Justice for Harper, a case that redefined accountability. Danielle didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She walked straight past the cameras, past the noise, past the manufactured chaos of triumph. And when a reporter shouted, "Do you feel vindicated?" she stopped, turned slightly. Her voice cut clean. "I feel documented." Behind her, Bradley Henson disappeared into the crowd, not surrounded by sirens or ceremony, just consequences. The gavel came down. The number was spoken, $5.6 million. And for the cameras, that looked like the end. For the city, it was the beginning of panic. Inside Brookhaven City Hall, a closed-door emergency session unfolded within hours of the ruling. No press, no statements, just raw financial fear and legal advisors speaking in clipped sentences. That verdict establishes precedent. One consultant warned, if anyone else comes forward with similar evidence, this department becomes a liability spiral. And they already were. Within 5 days, 3 former complaints against Bradley Henson resurfaced. Quietly buried incidents where minority homeowners had claimed he had needlessly escalated encounters, questioned their presence, or demanded unnecessary compliance. None of those cases had gone public. Until now, Danielle's lawsuit had stripped the lid off a system that relied on silence to survive. Meanwhile, Henson sat alone in his apartment, staring at an official document stamped with final authority. Law enforcement certification revoked, permanent. No appeal language, no reconsideration clause, just the brutal finality of consequence. He wasn't just fired, he was professionally erased. But the most damaging blow came when the department issued a quiet internal directive. Officer Henson's conduct is to be referenced in future de-escalation training as an example of authority misuse. He hadn't just lost his career, he had become a lesson. Across town, Danielle didn't celebrate. She prepared. Her attorney scheduled a post-verdict compliance hearing with the city, a legal checkpoint ensuring the reforms ordered by the court were being executed, not just promised. She reviewed compliance documents with the same meticulous focus she had used on her own case, because money was not the objective. Control of outcome was. 3 weeks later, the Brookhaven Police Department released their reform directive, mandatory independent review board, full body cam transparency policy, zero tolerance harassment clause, updated arrest and engagement protocols. These were not performative gestures. They were court-enforced obligations tied directly to the Harper ruling. Danielle had forced the system to restructure itself around her existence. But the city couldn't let the narrative remain controlled by her silence. So they tried one last maneuver, a closed-door settlement modification offer, an additional confidential payout in exchange for withdrawing public commentary and distancing herself from future reform engagement. A polite bribery attempt in legal packaging. Danielle read the proposal once, then slid it back across the table. "No," she said simply. "You already paid for the mistake. Now you live with the lesson." Her voice wasn't angry. It was terminal. Outside, the world was still watching. But what they didn't see was what happened behind the curtain. The police union fought the ruling. The city's insurance carrier raised premiums by 47%. Training methodology statewide began referencing Brookhaven as a compliance failure case study. And Danielle? She returned to her daily court schedule as if nothing had changed. Because for her, this wasn't a moment. It was a recalibration of power. And power does not announce itself. It simply moves. The first apology came quietly, buried in a local press release. Paragraph 4. Neutral language. Carefully engineered humility. We acknowledge the distress caused and are committed to restoring trust with the community. It was meant to close the wound. Instead, it reopened it, because 2 days later, a photo surfaced online. A fundraiser organized by the Brookhaven Police Union. A private event. Officers in uniform. Drinks. Applause. And standing at the center of one frame, Bradley Henson. Not as a speaker. Not as a guest of honor. But not as someone who was supposed to be there either. The caption read, "Supporting our brother through difficult times." The reaction was immediate and volcanic. Public outrage spiked again, sharper this time. The same city that had signed a $5.6 million check was now appearing to emotionally shield a man who caused it. And Danielle saw it before anyone called her. She stared at the image on her laptop screen, jaw rigid, not in anger, but in calculation, because that photograph wasn't just disrespect. It was defiance. Her attorney called within minutes. "They're trying to soften his image," Marcus said. "Rebuild the union's morale. But this crosses a line after a federal ruling." "So we stop it," Danielle replied. "How?" She closed the laptop. "We go public. Once. Properly." The following morning, Danielle Harper stood behind a podium on the courthouse steps. Cameras aligned like precision instruments. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't performative. This was strategy. "I have not sought visibility," she began. "But visibility was forced upon me. And when a law enforcement body publicly supports behavior already ruled unconstitutional, it sends a dangerous message." Her eyes met the sea of lenses. This case was never about humiliation. It was about consequence. And consequence is only meaningful when it is consistent. She stepped away. No theatrics. No applause. Just irreversible clarity. Within 24 hours, the police union president resigned. The fundraiser was condemned by the department itself, and the state's attorney general's office announced it would review potential violations of professional conduct related to the event. But while the city scrambled outwardly, another decision was made quietly. A rookie officer, confused by union rhetoric and departmental pressure, chose to clear the air with Danielle, believing a face-to-face interaction might help normalize the situation. He came to her home. No appointment, no notice, just rang the bell. Danielle opened the door and saw the uniform. Not Henson. Worse, the implication of authority returning to her doorstep again. "I'm just here to say we're not all like him," the officer said, attempting politeness. "Some of us want to move forward." Her gaze hardened instantly. "You were warned not to contact me without formal clearance," she replied. "You are now violating a court-defined boundary." He faltered. "I didn't mean—" "You don't get to improvise around my safety," she cut in. "Or my home." Within hours, a formal complaint was filed. The officer was placed on disciplinary review. The department issued a rare second apology, this one without qualifiers. And that is when the truth finally settled in. This was no longer just Danielle versus one broken man. It was Danielle versus a system that kept testing the same boundary, hoping it wouldn't bleed again. But the boundary was reinforced in steel. And there was only one step left. The final one. The choice. The city understood now. Not emotionally. Not morally. Legally. They had tried apologies. They had tried optics. They had tried quiet damage control. And every time, the system exposed itself again. Danielle never asked for another press conference, never demanded visibility, never escalated theatrically. She did something far more final. She filed a motion, a binding legal request to the state court, permanent protective protocols prohibiting any member of the Brookhaven Police Department from initiating direct or informal contact with her outside of documented legal procedure. Not for drama, for closure. The hearing lasted 37 minutes. Judge Whitaker did not debate it. She granted it. Clear language. Enforceable consequence. From that moment forward, Any attempt by any officer to approach Danielle Harper without formal clearance would result in immediate disciplinary action and civil liability. No ambiguity, no misunderstanding, no room for ego. The boundary became law. The department issued its final compliance report 3 months later. No further incidents. Full protocol adherence. Revised chain of command oversight. The system had stabilized, not because it wanted to evolve, but because it had been forced to. Bradley Henson disappeared entirely. No interviews. No counter-narratives. No comeback stories. His name resurfaced only in legal textbooks and training modules, referenced clinically. Case study, authority misuse and civil rights violation, Harper versus Brookhaven, a cautionary lesson, exactly where he belonged. And Danielle? She returned fully to her private life. Her cases, her schedule, her home, no patrol cars, no footsteps, no loud assumptions outside her door. One evening, she pulled into her driveway under the same familiar porch light and paused for just a second, not because of fear, because of recognition. This was a place where her autonomy had been challenged, and where it had been reclaimed. She stepped out her car, walked to her front door, unlocked it. No voice told her she didn't belong. No badge demanded permission. Just a silence, the kind that exists when the system finally understands the cost of crossing the wrong person. She closed the door behind her. Inside, the world returned to ordinary. And this time, ordinary meant safe. Not because someone allowed it, but because she enforced it. Not a spectacle, not a moral lecture, not a fantasy. Just a documented chain of cause and consequence. Ending exactly where it should have begun. At her front door, where she always belonged.